I was talking to Billy Corbin the other day about how the documentary business is going, and he was talking about how the sports documentary has kind of withered away, and this is going to change more and more in coming years. Stugotz, I don't know if you've seen some of what Showtime is doing, but when these production companies that are making athletes accessible allow the athletes to tell their own stories, you get a whole bunch of homogenized stuff that doesn't ring authentic. And I don't think people want to watch, but I might be wrong about this because there was a 10-part series on Michael Jordan that has now spawned Tom Brady doing that, and Magic Johnson's going to do that, and Derek Jeter's going to do that. But Billy Corbin, I'll have a longer conversation with him about that somewhere where you guys can, his insight is fascinating on this subject. And I love sports documentaries. I love well-done sports documentaries. But one of the forms that is now making an appearance in the documentary sphere that's not sports related is sort of the instant documentary on some sort of news item where you can gather a lot of information fast. And Hulu has a documentary coming out very quickly on everything that happened with Travis Scott at Astroworld. And
wow, they're turning around that quickly, huh?
Very, very, I don't know how soon, but Hulu has made a deal. And all I know, and please, if you guys can inform me more on this, I'm wanting to hear more information because I've read some things about needles in a crowd, and I've read some things about.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't give the needles in the crowd thing voice because that was disproven.
The reason I'm doing that is because my information here is partial. What I saw was a video in which I saw security getting basically trampled by people rushing into Astroworld, and then people died, and Travis Scott kept going on with the performance. And not because I'm not informed here, I have wondered without enough information. People die; these are serious things. I have wondered, well, how responsible should Travis Scott be as a performer who kept performing through the fact that people were getting crushed and were calling for help? How responsible should Travis Scott be? But I'm admitting that on the front end here, I don't have very much information about what happened here.
The way I understand it was that several people tried to warn security that something like this was potentially going to happen at Astroworld at that actual concert.
It's a music festival,
yes.
and it's irrefutable. There's plenty of video that shows that people were essentially begging for others' lives, and first responders had a lot of difficulty reaching people that were in need, all while this concert was still going on, while the headliner played.
He is being sued for a lot of money. Travis Scott, and I told you, Stugotz, when I saw one of these Netflix documentaries pop up on Travis Scott, I was blown away. I had not known before seeing that documentary at how strong his audience is, and I was not aware that he could fill sprawling arenas because of his energy. Not that he could headline music festivals is not something that I was aware of.
Does he encourage his crowd to rush the stage though? Because I think that's a big part of this.
So it's complicated because I actually tend to agree. Chuck D put out a statement, Chuck D, a Public Enemy, that was kind of in defense of Travis Scott that says, why is this all a Travis Scott story? These big companies, Live Nation, they're totally absolved because Travis Scott grabs the headlines. Okay, so it was run by Travis Scott. Hey, stop the concert. Why is it his call? You're producing it. Why are you giving all the power? It's convenient to not put this on the festival organizers. And I know Travis Scott is a part of that, but ultimately, if something is unsafe, he's not the public company that is behind it. So I don't want to put this all on Travis Scott, but I will say Travis Scott does have a very concerning history of a lot of reckless and dangerous behavior. Festivals that I've been to, I was at that Lollapalooza where he encouraged violence at one person. I have seen him act super inappropriately in ways that encourage violence at shows before that made me feel uncomfortable as it was happening.
I want to get back to this documentary because to me, it feels irresponsible. Part of why documentaries are good is because A, we've had enough time to kind of really process what's happened, and B, they've had enough time to collect good, real information explaining what's happened. The investigation is still ongoing. This thing just happened, and for you to come out with a documentary called Astroworld, Concert from Hell, this is tabloid journalism, albeit in a video form.
We don't know when, though, the date.
when it's coming out,
Right.
it's, let me see, I had.
Well, typically, documentaries need a lot of time to sift through this video. Unfortunately, this was a documentary that played out in real time. I have seen hundreds of videos from when that festival, from before it even opened its gates, because a lot of the gates were crashed.
It's a horror movie. It seemed from the very start, okay? If you saw the video of people just running in, and it was unclear, right? Security, horses, everybody was trying to stop people, and they were just pouring into the place and sprinting past security and horses to get where they were going. It was unclear whether they had paid, whether they cared to pay, but it looked chaotic before it started, and then people died.
Not knowing who the filmmaker is or what the general vibe of this documentary is, like, I guess, I mean, I'm curious how you can call it tabloid journalism without having read or seen about it. I haven't read what you've read, but like, what is the difference between like a 30-minute feature on 60 Minutes with a journalist versus this being on Hulu? I don't know.
Well, a couple things. One is when you make a documentary, which is how it is framed on Hulu, there is a level of, I think, gravitas to that goes beyond a news report. One. Two, they called it Concert from Hell.
You've already decided what the framing is going to be.
Exactly.
Well,
like this,
I think it's fair to classify what happened at Astroworld as hellish. It was a mass casualty event.
I think it's that, but it's not even just that. There are so many places where people listening to this or people watching don't have a connection point on empathy, on whatever it is. All of us can imagine the horror of being trampled to death, asking for help. People don't care. Musicians won't stop. The party won't stop. And then you are dead. All of us can imagine the horror of that. So Concert from Hell feels, feels fair within that context, no matter who's responsible.
It's sensationalist, though. You're choosing language, like Woody said. You're choosing language. It's not even about describing what happened, right? It's about how can I grab people's attention, right? To me, there's
okay. So like Astroworld, what happened is not necessarily leading the jury,
right? Like tragedy at Astroworld is not the same as Concert from Hell.
Yeah.
It just
right. I get what you're saying.
And given, again, this isn't like it's a year later and they've combed through all this video and interviewed tons of people and come out with this very well documented, reported documentary. It's literally like, this thing just happened.
Right, but I think
people are still grieving.
But I think they're doing a lot of the work on it. So I don't think that they've decided that that's what the title's going to be.
Date, do we not? Like they're
it's available now. I just showed Stugotz a screenshot of the play button on Hulu. So, I mean, I guess I could watch it and then report back.
More background on Travis Scott and his history. In 2017, there was a concert in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he encouraged fans to rush the stage. Several people, including a police officer, got hurt. A New York show that was fairly infamous. He was telling fans to jump from a tier above. Someone fractured their vertebrae, and he was praising their fearlessness. The Lollapalooza situation was incredibly ugly, where he told the crowd to kick someone's ass because he tried to take his shoe, and he begged his fans to beat the shit out of someone that was in this crowd. He routinely tells people to rush the stage. He puts his fans in dangerous situations. It's a high-energy show. And he has a younger audience, which actually goes into the tragic casualties that went into this. In the Woodstock documentary that I'm sure you saw that HBO put out, they tried to pin a lot of the behavior that happened during the Limp Bizkit set in particular on Fred Durst, inciting a riot. I do think Travis Scott, as a performer, has a responsibility to rein in something if it is indeed being relayed to him that it's getting out of hand, and he shouldn't necessarily incite that. However, when we look at the chart here of who's most responsible, it's the money. You don't just say, it's Travis. It's a licensing agreement, for Christ's sakes. I know it's Travis Scott and it's Astroworld. He's not chairman of a board deciding what the safety protocols is. That's why you bring in a production company.
I wonder how much responsibility should go to Travis Scott, because when something horrible happens, the next thing that happens with the people absorbing it, if they feel helpless, is who do I blame? Where do I blame? It's impossible to blame something faceless. But a guy storming around on stage when I'm finding horrifying video of people screaming because they're being trampled to death, hey, won't you stop the show? I'm not blaming anyone else on the stage. I'm not blaming any people with wires, anybody else. I'm not blaming by name security, anybody who was closer, anybody who wasn't performing, anybody who can't hear. Like I'm closer to what was happening in the crowd. I'm not blaming any of them. I'm blaming the one guy they all gathered around to see. That's because that's the only guy I know. I don't know any of the other names.
And to me, it's damning to Travis Scott's character as all the video that's readily available, not just that night, but all the previous performances. I think that actually puts more blame on Live Nation because Travis Scott is capable of this. That actually incentivizes the reason why you have a proper security protocol in place, why you have more first responders in place because he has this history.
So this is something else. I don't know if it's been reported or not, but a lot of the security people at these concerts and festivals post-COVID are people who have never worked security before. I mean, there's the people who were doing these jobs before.
They were new to the job.
They're like not just new to the job.
Too. Yeah.
Like I've heard stories of security guys where it's like, this is my first time,
right?
And it's like working a festival. Like, no, this is my first time working security. Like their introduction to concert security.
I almost always think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong about this. I almost always think if I see a person acting as security at any of these things, oh, they're just wearing a shirt. They're just a person wearing a shirt that says security. I don't expect like training in CPR. I don't expect.
Live Nation has gotten off the hook. They flatly have. And I think Chuck Day, I'm going to read part of his statement because I do think it's poignant. I cannot believe we're at the point I got to say this out loud. Travis Scott is a performer, an act, not a concert promoter. He doesn't run the sound or the venues or the festivals or their staff. He doesn't build stages, coordinate logistics. He is not an expert in crowd control or security or emergency medical services. But he does trust Live Nation and all other concert promoters who are supposed to do all of this. And yet here we are, 10 deaths and counting, 10 broken families. He also goes on to say, I'm calling on Michael Rapinoe's entire team at Live Nation and the consortium of all major concert promoters to do the right thing, to step up and out of the shadows, fix these situations, save lives, to stop letting one young black man take the blame, the hate, the fall. We don't know everything that happened or exactly what failed, but concert promoters have all the power to make the changes to keep everyone safe and alive.